1st May 2023, that was last week, the world celebrated International Labor Day. Some countries call it International Workers' Day. Certain countries don't celebrate it, while Uganda is among the countries that have made this day a public holiday. Does this day count in a country like Uganda? We are looking at labor rights today, specifically students' perspective on the state of labor rights in Uganda. There are several issues that we are going to unpack. To start with, what labor rights exist in Uganda? Are these labor rights being protected? How far has the government gone with the protection of labor rights? What are the challenges when it comes to implementation of labor rights? And the students will be able to suggest solutions to the promotion of labor rights in this country. I welcome you to the inter-university debate for this week, which is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. I'm your moderator. My name is Fancy Jendalake. I'm an advocate and a tax consultant. I'm joined by a panel of 2 gentlemen and 1 lady from different universities. You're welcome to the inter-university debate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me introduce the panelists. I'll start with Mr. Amanya Abdu. Amanya Abdu is a student at Nkumba University. Abdu, you're welcome to the talk show.
It's a pleasure being here. Good morning.
Good morning. You've decided to maintain your seat.
Absolutely.
Okay. Our second panelist is Miss Preta Peace Namasaba, who is a law student at Bakeri University. Preta, you're welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, another gentleman who also decided to maintain his seat every time he comes on the talk show is Mr. Masawi Ivan. Ivan is a student at Chambogo University. Ivan, you're welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you at Gender Nase. Thanks at Civic Space TV and Center for Constitutional Governance. Greetings from Chambogo. Yeah, we are really delightful whenever you give us an invite here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for always honoring our invitation. We are looking at students' perspective when it comes to labor rights in Uganda. So, as we know, we celebrated International Labor Day last week on Monday. We didn't work. For those of us who work, I'm very sure you didn't study. For those of you who study. So Uganda is among the countries that celebrate International Labor Day. Let's have a bit of a discussion before we even delve into this. We had a bit of a discussion in the boardroom, which I think we should bring here. Is it important for Uganda to celebrate International Labor Day, most especially to make it a public holiday? I'll start with you, Abdu, because you had a very strong opinion about it.
Oh, thank you so much. To begin with, I want to express my concerns about the Labor Day. Ordinarily, I'd look at the Labor Day as an occasion where we talk about labor rights. We would honor the activities of all kinds of laborers. We celebrate our labor. Now, what happens usually is not the case in our country specifically. Whereas you would expect laborers to collectively honor this day, it is usually a policy that it is a public holiday, and that's how people end up honoring it. But if you go on individual basis and ask laborers, majority of people do not even know when the date is. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that basically the Labor Day is something insignificant if we celebrate it because it has been fixed on our calendars. However, as a country, we could make the Labor Day a big deal. We could take the Labor Day as a point in time to appraise ourselves, to appraise our labor force, and also to give credit where it's due. When you recall the Cuban Independence Day, Fidel Castro was actually addressing the masses. He saluted the labor force for the sheer dedication they are putting towards the country's development. Talk about the farmers in the gardens, talk about the people in business, talk about the industrialists. Like, these people are being celebrated for whatever thing they are doing here. I want to remind everyone here, when COVID-19 came in, the country was locked down. It was at that material point in time that we realized that borders are actually very important, that the tipper drivers are actually very important, but we have never called them essential workers. Now, on such days as Labor Day, it's time when we take stock of who is important. And by the everybody is important, as a matter of fact. But when you see, practically when you see in Uganda, what happens on Labor Day is organized trade unions or workers or labor unions marching to the ceremonial grounds. People such as the border borders, the market vendors, they are left out. Yet our labor force or our labor market is so diverse. Yes.
Okay, so you feel at the moment these people are not being appreciated?
We are not giving due credit to the Labor Day, and we could do better.
Okay, Preta, what's your opinion when it comes to celebrating International Labour Day? Because I know you also had a very strong opinion about it.
Yes, my opinion differs from his. I think, like, days like this, these public holidays, it is very, very important to celebrate them. International Labour Day and and all the others. He talks about not that the day not being honored in its in its fullness, but International Labour Day is why we are sitting here today, talking about labor rights. That day being on the calendar affords us all a chance to reflect on the state of labor rights and all of that in the country. Almost every day we are seeing, workers striking. Teachers are like, oh, today want more salary. Doctors are like, working conditions. Soldiers, are revolting against their bosses and all of that. And with the way life is so busy, it is so packed, like all these things happen and we move on. Like, that's how life is nowadays. Something bad happens, we talk about it, and the next day it's something else. But having this day on the calendar, where we not go to work, we not go to school, it gives us a chance to reflect, to think about it, to think maybe as a student, what should I demand from my university? As a worker, should we unionize and all of that? And he talked about border borders and truck drivers and not being appreciated. But I think it is more to do with the division between the formal sector and the informal sector. Because teachers, soldiers, policemen, it's very easy for them to unionize and to bargain for their collective rights. Whereby border borders, someone can ride a border for 6 months and they move on to vending. They can ride a truck for 1 year and the next year they're into agriculture. So these are the kinds of job that require them to be in like so many places. They're literally always in transit, that they never get the chance to pause and take stock and be like, oh, maybe we should come together and demand this from the authorities. And I think
Okay, do you, let me just interrupt a little, because I know during the celebration, medals are given out. Personally, this year, my grandfather received a medal, and we were excited. So, from Abdul's perspective, do you think on a Labor Day we should have a border receive a medal for work well done, a truck driver for work well done, a market vendor? Am I getting a point where, am I trying to understand where you're coming from?
I'll respond to that later.
Okay. Do you think we should have such people also appreciated and honored on Labor Day?
Yes. I think the medals are given to workers who stand out. Maybe a policeman, has been so good at their job.
How come
or
we have not
teacher
had
has
a border
told
stand
so
out?
well. And as I've said, the work that they're doing, you can do it today and you can't do it tomorrow. All of us here could be border riders. You don't need the certificate. You don't need any accreditation, to get on the road and begin carrying passengers. But in a scenario where, should I say, a border rose up and is like, you know what, I want to bring sanity to the collection of borders in Kampala, I actually think that border would deserve a medal and would actually get one.
Okay.
If they stood out.
Okay, yes, Ivan. Does this day count? Do you think we should continue to celebrate it, especially the way we celebrate it?
We will not deviate very much from Abdu. Going into the preamble of this country, we have our own history. Before even the coming of the Arabs and the missionaries, labor was ever recognized by kings. The most hardworking people in society were ever recognized. It was not by accident that we have Labor Day. With the Arabs bringing in slave trade, I think recognition of labor was a little destabilized. The whites who came, the colonialists, were not far that better. They changed our mindset to be workers of farms, but still labor was recognized. The most hardworking were always team leaders, and it is healthy for society to recognize labor. But when we come towards our perspective as Uganda to analyze the day itself, from all angles, we can justify that we need to have a Labor Day. But from again all angles, we can then look at the justification from who are the beneficiaries. When the minority of Ugandans are the beneficiaries of the Labor Day and the majority are left out, who are the informal sector, the majority are left out, who are the private sector. In a country where we are still having a lot of gaps in the labor sector being eaten up by politics, we are seeing the declining trend of trade unions. We are seeing the declining trend of white-collar jobs, that today doctors are mockers. You see them in Makerere being put on trucks and what, student and doctors looking for space. I think it calls, as my sister stated, that we need to reflect. I don't think that government is taking it serious to reflect, if it meant reflecting. Because this is a country that has had a constitution with labor rights or economic rights for the last, from 1995 to date, is over now 25 years, 28 years per se. We would have seen some progresses in terms of reflection. The country is a ministry of labor and 3 other state ministries to implement labor. It is a country with national trade union. It is a country with representation of workers up to the district level. At sub-county, there are councillors for workers. But it is a country where it doesn't justify that these workers are represented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's delve into the discussion now. And I'll start with you, Abdu.
Yes, yes.
We are looking at labor rights today. What is the status quo of labor rights in Uganda?
Uganda beautifully has a myriad of labor laws. We have the Employment Act 2006. We have the Labor Disputes Arbitration and Settlement Act. We have the Occupational Health and Safety Act. We have the Workers' Compensation Act. And besides these laws and policies in place, we have institutional frameworks. To begin with, from the lowest level of government at districts, they're supposed to be, how do you call them?
Workers' council.
Okay, labor tribunals. Yeah, we ought to have them at the district level. That's the basic. Then, secondly, we have the industrial court that administers labor justice. We also have non-governmental organizations in place who look into promoting labor rights in the country. But now, with all this, where is the problem? You realize the labor industry of the country is dotted with a plethora of challenges. I'll begin with a very quick one, the causalization of labor force. You note from my sister's statement here that labor is considered in terms of academic achievements, yet ordinarily labor cuts across.
Yeah.
But today what happens is that people who went to school actually attempt to be the laborers, are the people who are given higher, credibility over others. The problem of work casualization is that it leaves out the informal sector. Let's talk about the maids, for example. Let's start from there before we even think about other people. Let's talk about the maids. Let's talk about the truck drivers. Let's talk about the border borders. Let's talk about the vendors. Let's talk about the farmers. These are informal sectors. They are not organized per se, but then they are the two causal. Let's look at large-scale commercial investments in factories. People, because they are not holding academic credentials, they are not giving employment contracts. The problem, the hallmark of all this is that people who are not learned do not get employment contracts. And what is the net effect of this? That they can be fired from their workplaces. 2, they do not have job security. 3, they work at the mercy of the employers. Now, with this, you realize that workers are subjected into exploitation. We live in a capitalistic state in the first place, and the effect of this capitalism is that the state itself is swallowed up by the capitalists, by the investors themselves, to the extent that the government cannot enforce its own rights, cannot enforce the laws to protect its workers. Now, you note that, like I did say earlier on, people who are organized, who have gone to school, have better chances over those in the informal sector who are not educated perhaps or per se, and who are not organized. Now, what is the effect of this? The effect of not having organized societies to advocate and promote labor rights is that such people are always victims of labor exploitation. You note that in our country, because of the dire conditions of labor, people tend to go abroad, people tend to go overseas to go and work regardless. Reports indicate that the labor conditions abroad are despicable. That notwithstanding, our citizens are proud to go and work the other side other than working here. Instead of we communicating to our governments to first of all fix the situation at home, we are looking at exporting labor. Okay, when I say exporting, it does appear like it's the government sending them, but then it is the people wanting to suffer from elsewhere other than suffering from the country here. Now, let me not forget this. This is very important. You see, at the end of the day, the purpose of work is to earn. And why do people need to earn? They have daily costs to meet. The government has fundamentally failed, even if not in the laws, in the legislations, has failed to provide better services in this country here. One, let's talk about health. A worker, a casual laborer, does not have health insurance. He's going to work himself to his hands to the bone, and he gets peanuts at the end of the day. That the money he gets cannot even compensate for the health lost. When you look at the minimum wage fixed by this country, it is 6,000, and this was fixed in 1984. Up to date, it has not been amended, and employers are taking full advantage of this on full scale. That you can hire a security guard to work at your home or wherever, and you pay this person 5,000 shillings a night, and yet the firm that contracts this person here, you pay maybe 700,000 or 800,000 per month, but the laborer, the security guard who carries the gun and guards you at night, is paid 5,000 per day. Now we have problem in the wages that we assign as a country, and secondly also, you note that the payment does not match the cost of living today. A person who lives in Entebbe and works in Kampala would have to spend about 10,000 in transport alone. Let's talk about the electricity. Let's talk about the water bills. Let's talk about health insurance. Now, if the government can improve this infrastructure and utilities, it may a little bit ameliorate the workers' plight or lessen the burden of expenditure and all that. So, to begin with, we ought to appreciate the value of work. Unfortunately, our labor industry does not appreciate or even value human resource. It does exploit it instead. And it's not until we value human resource and we give them the due that they do deserve, we will always continue sinking and we will be exploiting the laborers. I want to conclude with this on this very one here. You look at a government worker, for instance, who's going to retire. Let's talk about a teacher, for example, a primary teacher who earns about 400,000, and pays NSSF, pays other taxes. He has a daily expenses to incur. By the time this person's pension comes out, there's inflation that is eating up. Cost of living always rises exponentially. It doesn't come down. If at all you have a saving, a lifetime saving of, let's say, 20 million, for instance, by the time you get it, how much will you have when cost of living has shot way higher? This is the explanation, I think, that we have for old people actually in the labor force. Someone works up to the age of 85. Isn't that nonsensical? Ask our ministers, why aren't they resigning? Because they do not have safeguards at their old age. The labor industry is so fragile. It is so weak that someone will have to work up to death. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Thank you so much, Abdu. That is a lot to unpack. Let me move to Preta. In your own perspective and using your own observance, what is the current status of labor rights in this country?
So he dealt with our legal framework surrounding labor rights domestically, but Uganda too has international obligations about labor rights, and we are party to many treaties on that. Unfortunately, many of these conventions are about forced labor, and I think on that note, Uganda is really doing well. And as you talked about it, in regards to our international obligations, I think where as a country we are failing is with the human trafficking. Workers going to the Middle East and saying they were tortured, they were not paid, and all of that. Usually each year, we hear a few stories here and there, and nothing is really done. So I think in that sense, the government has failed in its obligations to the citizens to protect exported labor. And I think that the issue therein lies with the fact that many of these farms that export labor are owned by what I would call government bigwigs. So the news comes out that bad things are happening to Ugandans in the Middle East, and everybody's like, oh, we should do something, but really can't do something because I would say some people are untouchable. So there's that kind of impasse. But furthermore, when you talk about labor rights, the implication is that there is labor. And I feel in Uganda, we're in a situation whereby there is no really labor. I think currently we are experiencing the highest levels of unemployment that this country has ever seen. More than 80% of the youth are unemployed. So it seems a bit of a farce when you talk about labor rights when there is no labor, people are not really working, or they are underemployed, they're doing jobs that they shouldn't be doing, that their academic documents and experience could deserve better of. And the whole concept of labor rights is about bargaining. It's about coming together to create unions and try to hold leverage over your employers. But in the case of Uganda, the workers really do not have that leverage, because as a doctor, you're going to say that we're laying down our tools for 1 month unless you improve our working conditions. And the president will be like, oh, okay, if you do that, then we shall bring Cuban doctors. So what are you going to do? You have no leverage. You are disposable. You are easily replaceable. I remember nurses during the pandemic attempted to strike nationwide. They said, we are going to lay down our tools for 1 week. They got a few threats here and there, and the 1 week wasn't through with it, and they're already back to work. Some with teachers, they want to strike, and they look at the alternatives, whereby you attempt to strike, you are dismissed, and they bring in other teachers to take your position, because there is there's a surplus of labor. And I think in his address on Labor Day, the president tweeted out that as Ugandans, we're always asking about employment opportunities from the government. And he said the government only has about 600,000 jobs to give out per year. And if you look at Makerere alone, graduation, I think there can be like 500,000 students graduating in one cohort alone. So imagine all those 500,000 are graduating from one university alone, and there are 600,000 jobs. And not all those jobs are going to be for fresh, fresh people from that university. Others are for express people and all of that, including the other 10 public universities in this country, plus the private ones, and people from senior 6 and senior 4. Literally, the 600,000 jobs that the government has are not enough. And then he said in his recommendations, he's like, we have put in place the parish development model, and young people should use that as a means of trying to get employment, to try to earn. But that also has, its disadvantages, which I will not be getting into today. But yes, I think my main takeaway from the status quo in Uganda is that we really can't speak of labor rights when there is no labor. I think the first issue that we need to deal with is, the unemployment and the underemployment. Then we can talk about working conditions, bargaining power, and leverage.
Okay, thank you,
Firstly,
Greta. Yes, Abdul.
before my good brother comes in, I want to say this about the labor enforcement and the rights altogether. You see, like I did say earlier on, that we have district labor officers ideally, but then one issue that I have noticed is that they are not distributed equally. The
They
other
have no
districts,
budget. They have even
yes,
no
they
budget.
have, others have no budget. Even the ones, there are some districts that actually do not have the labor offices. So how would people enforce their rights in the first place? When you look at the law, under the Labor Dispute Settlement and Arbitration Act 2022, yeah, it provides for 5 judges in the tribunal, but apparently we have 2. And
In the industrial
Yes.
court.
in the industrial code, and when you trace from 2021, the number of cases registered filed in that court, there are over 2,000 cases that were unresolved, and they were carried forward to 2022 and even up to date, and yet each and every day cases are being registered. Now, I want you to consider a house girl going to enforce her labor rights against maybe the bosses. Is that practical? This house girl, first of all, does not even know the avenues. Secondly, this house girl cannot hire a lawyer to advocate for her labor rights. So where does that leave us at? Enforcement is a bigger problem, and it's not until that the government actually makes the enforcement framework a little bit easier, there will constantly be labor right abuses in this country here. Yes.
Thank you, Abdul, for that addition. Let me now bring Ivan on board. So, Ivan, you've been listening. I've seen you smiling, nodding. So, it's time for you to give us your perspective on the status of labor rights in this country.
Yeah, honestly, I want to thank my brother. He has really given justice on the state. I can't deviate much from his words. That is the state of labor in Uganda. On 1st May 2023, we had a Labor Day celebration in Namutumba. As it was going on, a big budget passed for the day. Doctors were on strike. Those are senior health officers. We have teachers who have not gone for pay, who are planning to strike. Very many other people who are in that line. But on the 2nd May, we had bad news as a country. State Minister for Labour was gunned down by his security guard on issues which are also regards to labour. So condolences to Ministry of Labour and to the family of Patrick Charles Okello Ngola and the people of Oyam. But where does this leave us as a country? Basically, even if we, as people who have attended school, we can discuss more of the rights and what, but from a governance point, when we go to vote, we entitle people to work for us in regards to some of these dockets like labor. There should be a plan. Any government should have a plan. I think where the whole of the governance issue regards labor is lost is that our government has failed to have a plan. When you go to even nearby countries like Kenya and Rwanda, I've had the chance to visit, you really see they also grapple with unemployment, but they have a plan in place. So the biggest challenge is our environment of the workforce, because the workforce contributes to the country, the state of the country, in terms of taxes, in terms of even outlook, security, because human resources what Uganda uses to market itself elsewhere. It is our human resource. When we go back a few years ago, Uganda was also exporting doctors to Kenya. The likes of Dr. Kiza Besigye worked in Kenya, because by that time Makerere was producing enough doctors. Today we are in a state that we have so many that even intern doctors have no hospitals to practice. The government has no money to pay them. We go still in the education sector, the budget was cut. I was seeing the budget framework paper for the coming financial year. It has been cut that 4,000 teachers who are waiting to be posted by the Education Service Commission are not going to be employed until further notice. So that shows government has no plan for its workforce. It has not sat down and planned its deficiencies. You only hear the president saying, now I've switched to scientists. Others, you're no longer important, your salary scale can remain. My scientists will earn 4 million. But justify to us why you need the scientists at the moment. Is that the way a country operates? Or a country should have a plan that before you have others, but if you want to increase the level of science, create a science environment in terms of production, manufacturing, and innovation, so that all these youths who are into the education sector are given an environment which justifies why they need the science. But you'll not wake up and only add salaries when you don't look through the system, because the workforce starts as low as education. Once your education is not streamlined with the deficiency in the country, is not streamlined with the output the country wants to put across, it is not streamlined. You even look at the visions 2040, what, you don't see a clear outline or streamlining of the country's education with the workforce and with the planning. I am a person who is in an engineering field. I completed recently, but when you move out is when you realize that this country engineering is maybe part of the informal sector. It is just formal in terms of papers, but you may find yourself in that is it. So it all comes back to planning. The NRM, which is in power, had a manifesto. And part of its manifesto, it should have included paying public servants. So whenever you see there is no money to pay them, you wonder. But that is, again, we have always discriminated the majority of Ugandans who are the informal sector. I want to applaud my brother. That even when most times we come to such platforms, we take ourselves so formal that we forget that the biggest percentage of Ugandans, over the 40 million, over 39 are those in the informal sector. Who should be contributing so high if we had organized our informal sector, especially agriculture. The reason why the burden on government is too much is because of its laziness. I should call it government of Uganda is lazy to some extent. to organize the informal sector to be more productive in terms of production and tax collection. Government gets very little, and now it has to depend on an advocate like gender to tax you high as it can to create for you an environment which is so expensive so that it can survive. But it has neglected organizing and investing more in sectors that would even prioritize. Because even the labor rights as a government, you also have an obligation. You're the regulator. Whenever our sisters and brothers are dying in the Middle East, you look at Honorable Betty Among, come up with very shabby statements, and you're a minister, for God's sake. Eh?
I was watching
Eh?
on news recently. She said over, I don't remember the percent exactly. She said about 80% of unemployed youth are not looking for jobs.
Yeah, that is the minister we
very
have.
nonsensical statement, actually.
That is the minister we have for labor, but it is really demanding and demeaning to us, especially 78% of us who are youth. Both statistics show now that we are moving past 50% of us unemployed between just 18 to 30 who are unemployed. That is a little demeaning that a minister can give such a justification. Yet the other day you find they are looking for terms with Saudi Arabia, terms with Oman. I think, as my sister stated, that this country has a deep state. There are people controlling even this labor force that they want to hold certain group of people hostage at their state of condition of life. Because really, when you look at the government priorities, you don't really see goodwill and commitment, especially with education, because the education system is one way of solving labor issues. When you even look at the existing trade unions, you know, they have been politicized. I feel sorry for doctors. I'm very sorry that you have a president who kneels for the president. Hey, president, come back in 20. That is some funny doctor or something of that kind. So how can such a person represent you? I can't be a doctor and be represented by Dr. Olado when he kneels to the president on political bargain that come and represent us, but when on your welfare, issues that are obligated to the president of Uganda Medical Association. I'm a biomedical engineer, a brother to them to some extent. They are not really put. That you have senior, we have had the social media by Dr. James Sentongo. Yeah, how the state of healthcare on Twitter, if you watch the space, how many hospitals even don't have generators, don't have lights. When we have such issues and the president of the Uganda Medical Association has politicized the welfare and the state of the people he should represent, when we go to, we just saw a saga with NSSF. Those are still workers' money, workers' rights. We saw confusion from the minister, from the trade union, from their representatives who are now fagging. They are now fagging the people they represent because the whole NSSF scandal was faggery. The minister fagged, the members of NSSF fags. Workers can't work and their money is lost. Not invested, not put into production. And in the end of the day, as a government, you now have to borrow to pay workers their money because they will show you. But this is a country where NSSF is run like that. It was back in Temangalo scandal, money was lost. To try the investments, people showed them. You look at how the recent sitting of the NSSF scandals went. There is no accountability at the end of the day. The minister denies, the executive director, the workers. You find that Dr. Yamok, representative of workers, signed the money. Another trade union also signed the money. People share bonanzas as friends in a evening bar somewhere. And these are money meant to improve the state of workers. So it calls up governance. You can't shy away from it. Governments need to have a plan. I request our viewers, and especially the NRM government is our great viewer. at least use this time and get a plan. It is becoming worse. By the time NSSF, people who wake up to wear suits are behaving like thugs, stealing money of workers, and then in the end of the day, even parliament has become, it is just there to expose, but it does much. Because we all saw the report, Honorable Mpaka exposed everything, but we were all left to cry. Yeah, they have lost, sorry for them. That is not how a country is operated. So the state, as I've told you, is just a state which shows there is no plan going forward, but we live by accident. We are not intentional of what we want to see from, because the human resource of a country is the outlook. But if we are a country where we have policemen in such a state, we have army men now, people fear them with their gun. We have teachers who are protesting next week, sending strike. We have doctors who are on Twitter on strike. We have engineers in the city who have also shied away from
I've
roads.
also seen a notice for lecturers.
Yeah,
In public
I'm sorry, I've
universities.
categorized them as
Yeah.
teachers. That is how Uganda has reduced the lecturer. You need to strike in order for you to survive. They have reduced it. You go to study your books, but you still have to take the informal routes to being very informal in order to survive. So it calls upon consciousness, because the policy framework around can sustain, is good on paper. You can really be honest that the 1995 framers of the constitution were really patriotic, Odoki and his commission. But the implementation, I don't know. Because my sister put it that the world is running very fast, and most of us, I think the young people are unconscious. We just want to knock whatever faces us, but it becomes challenging. Kenya, our sister, our brother, maybe, you can see they have one way of organizing labor has been through circles and cooperatives. Here, the Ministry of Trade abolished them. I come from a region which was led by Ugis Cooperative Union. It is now non-existent. They are, because the president felt these people who wanted to centralize the revenue collection and centralize administration. So these trade cooperatives lost. But Kenya, from as low as borders to taxis to buses to every profession in Kenya, is into a trade union. They have organized their labor force. Kenya alone can account for how much it generates from its matatus, because all are in circles.
Yes.
But here in Uganda, even when you see Kasaija blowing that we shall go this and this, it means that even on paper, the only workforce Uganda depends on is these public servants, and now there it has to be regressive on them in some extent. But what is it that has failed government regulate? And because towards the election, it is very easy. He has always known how to get to them. You pull one of them and you. But what after elections? Why do you fail to recognize, organize, regulate? Because we have always seen borders being accused of killing prominent people in Kampala. Then you hear the next day, all borders should be registered. All borders. Where does that discussion end? Because their registration is not only purposes of security, but as a government to plan how many borders come on board every year, how much revenue should we tap, how many taxis come on board, what amount of revenue should we tap. But if you're failing, and only you bringing up an excuse when you feel now a border has been used in the attempted murder of General Katumba, let's say borders should be registered. Then after 2 weeks, it was not a border, let's leave them aside. We need to have a workforce that is regulated, not only in terms of security, but even their welfare, even that you can account. Government should account for the state. Because even to solve this big unemployment space, like my sisters put it, especially for us who go to universities, we think it is automatically should be employed. Sorry for us. Yeah? To solve it, it needs a plan. You should be aware of what amount of labor are we in need. which departments, what time. In our vision and work plan, in our manifesto as a ruling government, where have we aligned with what is coming from institutions? How best can we leverage with the East African community coming on board? If it is coming, because there has been years of fooling us, it comes this year and the other. With the markets opening, we see African Free Continental Trade Area coming into place. How best are you leveraging from organizing yourself so that when opportunities, because with internet has brought opportunities, but because it has found a labor not organized, we now see it as a threat taking away jobs. But how best have we used it to leverage?
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Ivan, for that. Let me move back to Abdul. So, Abdul, let's talk about the ability of labor or workers to negotiate. To what extent do Ugandan, because we know the constitution provides for the right to collective bargaining, the right to form trade unions and so forth. Earlier you gave us the legal framework. But to what extent do the workers practically have the ability to negotiate and bargain?
Well, thank you so much, Fonsi. I want to re-emphasize that the government of Uganda is the biggest abuser of employment rights in this country. And to crown it up, they tend to suffocate all efforts of laborers to exercise their full rights. It is not just about putting the regulations and institutions in place. If you ask me, I would say that our laws and institutional frameworks are ornamental. They're for decoration purposes. But in reality, when you go to the police, you'd find about 3 police officers sharing same uniport. They sleep in that very terrible conditions. Talk about their wages. It doesn't come on time. And 2, you would also notice that the labor force in the country, majority of them do not actually have the capacity to negotiate. What normally happens is that because of the desperation in the country, people normally take the offers which are given to them, but they do not give sufficient considerations for the job offers that are given to them. Because someone wants to put food on the table, someone wants to medicate, someone wants to pay bills here and there. They go for any job which is available to them. And it is because of this reason that the employers, the government, who is the biggest employer, and other capitalists, they dictate the terms of employment to the people, and it's up to you. It's either you take it or you take it anyway because of the need. You have no choice. You are forced to take it. Now, to negotiate, under the laws, we have the right to collective bargaining. When you look at all the industries, majority of them actually have trade unions or labor unions. We have the teachers union, we have the doctors union.
Okay, Abdul, let me just cut you right there.
Yes,
We are going to take a short break
Okay.
and we'll come back. So let's take a short break and still come back with that same discussion. See you after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that short break. We are still with students from different universities. We are with Abdul, Preta, and Ivan. We are discussing the labor rights in this country, Uganda. We are getting the students' perspective. Before we took that short break, we were still with Abdul. So Abdul, you can pick up from where you stopped. You were talking about the ability of workers in this country to collectively bargain and negotiate for their rights.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I said that the laborers do not actually exercise their full rights when it comes to negotiating their job terms. Usually, it is the employer who dictates the terms of the employment, and it is upon them, the laborers, to either accept it or accept it. Why is it that it's compulsory for them to accept it anyway? The situation in the country is so precarious that it leaves laborers with no option other than taking whatever thing that is available for them. A person who's joining a government service, for example, into the police, knows very well that the housing facility in the police is so pathetic. But either way, he has no choice; he goes in there. Someone in the teaching sector, for example, a teacher can be deployed as far as a beam district, where actually there are no, facilities or amenities for this person here. But either ways, he has to live wherever he's staying, despite the fact that he's not given aids for the transfer and all that. He takes this job offer here. Now, in the law, we have a provision for collective bargaining. Usually what happens is that at the start of the job, there's no bargaining, there's no negotiation. It's simply acceptance of the job offer. Now, along the way, the law allows people to organize themselves into labor unions. And the essence of being organized is particularly for negotiation purposes, that upon one time, the labor force would collectively ask the employers for better opportunities, better conditions, talk about maybe insurance, talk about pay rise, talk about arrest, talk about maybe exploitation, that they could do this together. But unfortunately, we see that, like my good brother said earlier on, that the labor associations are so politicized at the end of the day that instead of getting the best, the people are being exploited. In fact, as a matter of fact, let me say this clearly, that the labor associations or the labor unions have been weaponized to actually kill the exercise or the enjoyment of labor rights in this country here. You remember the incident my good brother talked about, Dr. Oledo kneeling down before the president, calling for the president's aid. We have members of parliament for labor, representing laborers actually precisely. We have the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Development, and then we have a state ministry actually for employment and labor. But instead of all these avenues here, someone deems it fit to appeal to the president other than the frameworks which are in place. Now, how would someone at the bottom of the food chain benefit from this when the top leadership of the labor unions have been actually captured by the state? The government will find it a little bit convenient to have the top leadership of the teachers union at State House and have dinner and maybe brown envelopes for them than to deal with the teachers altogether. But if the teachers could march on the street and abandon, God forbid, I don't want to see this happening, but they have the right to do so anyway, that when their labor is not appreciated, they can actually choose to lay down the tools, and actually strike is legal in the employment industry. So anyway, I don't want such kind of situation to happen. But then if at all they do that, I think government would come to its senses. Usually this is what happens, that once organized unions go on industrial strike, the government, instead of responding with a negotiation, inviting them on the table, there are two options that the government actually takes. One, either calling its top leadership and bribing them from the table, or else sending the counter-terrorism police officers as if strike is terror act, sending the field force police unit to go and batter laborers. Then thirdly, actually, the third one is threatening the employees or the laborers with job sanctions. So any threat on job security actually leaves the laborers desperate and exposes them to exploitation by the employers. So going forward, it is very important that we first of all recognize that the labor unions are weaponized and politicized, and it is dangerous, it's precarious. If the laborers can realize that they can deal with the leadership, so you note that the problem stems from internal, from the labor unions themselves before going outside, that the top leadership are too cheap to give into to the tricks and plays of the employers, that the ordinary person, the ordinary laborer doesn't have the opportunity. When you go to the industrial parks, whether Namamve, whether Nakawa, Matuga, or even Jinja, what happens is that the laborers, the casual laborers who do not even have job offers, job contracts, a gate is open for them to enter in the morning. Few people are counted.
Like bats.
Like birds, and then the gate is open back. You move on. You do not have job security. Two, when you get accidents there, the company does not actually provide for you medical cover. And secondly, since because you do not have a written contract with these companies here, they can choose to disown you. They do not know you. So what these people go through, the plight of casual laborers in these industries, it's pathetic, it is worrisome. And I want to say that this makes the country fertile for any explosion in the near future. When you see soldiers not paid, the police officers not paid and marching with guns, I'm afraid there could be threats on our security, because they can use this to make ends meet. When you look at the teachers who are not paid properly, what do we expect? That the training that they give students and pupils would not be so sufficient. When doctors are not well paid, what do they end up doing? They commercialize the services at the expense of the citizenry. So the ground is so precarious and volatile that at any point in time there will be an explosion in this country here. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdul. Let me move to Preta. So let's talk about how government handles, just where Abdul stopped, how government handles issues of demonstrations. Now, recently, there is a law that was passed by the government that makes it puts conditions upon, the law call them essential workers from demonstrating. Now, when you look at that law, it puts nearly every single profession under the essential worker category. We have the doctors, the teachers, nearly everybody. So the law basically says, if you would like to strike, you need to seek permission, you need to give notice, yes, for you to be able to strike. Now, every time people start to strike, put out the notice, they receive written letters from government saying, remember this law. So what is your perspective generally around that area? How government treats the issues of demonstrations and demonstrations when it comes to labor rights?
Okay, before I answer your question, I would just like to recharacterize this dialogue. There is a difference between the other civil and political rights from human rights, from labor rights. See, all rights, are upon the state. It has its obligations and duties to the citizens and all of that. But the thing with labor rights is that the onus is not so much on the state, but on the individual workers. Because I said earlier, labor rights are all about coming together to unionize and to bargain for better working conditions, better pay, and all of that. And I've seen that, in this conversation, we are like giving much reference to the government, but I don't think that that is the issue here. Yes, the government has a role to play in labor. For example, in this country, they are the biggest employers. So of course, they have a big role to play in our labor laws, in their legislation, and and the enforcement. But a big portion of what we term as labor rights falls on us individuals. It falls on the workers, on the professionals, to come together in their bodies and talk to their employers. As I said earlier, the government has mostly fulfilled its obligations. I don't think a Ugandan can go maybe to the International Labour Organization and be like, the government has filled in this obligation to me. I don't think it is likely they will even accept to file that case. Because as I said earlier,
Let me just get this from you, Peter.
Yes.
What you're saying is that, let's just get it very, very clear.
Yes.
Government has done.
Without sugarcoating or anything, what you're saying is that the government has fulfilled its obligation when
Mostly.
it comes to labor rights.
mostly.
Yeah.
Which one specifically, let's get it, which one specifically has government fulfilled?
Abolition of forced labor, abolition of child labor. Those are the major conventions on labor rights internationally recognized. It's mostly forced labor and child labor.
The government has fulfilled.
Yes.
I
Of course,
strongly
we
disagree.
still have children
And the
working in a few months here and there, but it isn't such like a dire condition.
Okay, and the obligations under Article 40, the things of
Non-discrimination, yes.
non-discrimination,
Yes.
collective bargaining,
Yes.
trade unions,
Yes.
the right to withdraw labor, which that's the question that I
Yes,
posed to you.
yes,
It's
yes,
under
yes.
Article 40, the right to withdraw. Are those rights being respected, especially with government being on the spot?
Yes.
Probably because it's what we see. So has government observed those rights, specifically the right to withdraw labor?
Yes. So I'd like to take us back to the drawing board of modern labor rights. Most of what we term as labor rights, they are from Karl Marx's theories. See, when we talk about labor, labor is the foundation of, of all these different ideologies, capitalism and communism. Wars have been fought for those ideologies, all based on labor. Millions have died because of those ideologies based on labor. Governments have been overthrown and all of that. So, it is vital to have that at the back of your mind. Labor is the basis of many political parties around the world. For example, in the UK, they have the Labour Party, and we have seen that in the past year they've had strikes. Their medical workers have been striking. Their labor workers have been striking, because of poor working conditions. Which brings us back to Uganda. So you talked of that act which refuses
It gives
professionals.
conditions upon which essential workers, very
Yes,
stringent.
yes.
You should literally, there's a committee, you're supposed to write to council. Actually,
Yes.
there's a council. You're supposed to write giving a 90 days notice to the council. And then the council writes back allowing you
Yes,
to demonstrate.
yes. Like ideally, that is actually not even how demonstrations or strikes, work. They're supposed to be sudden. In a demonstration, you don't give notice that I'm going to do this and that. So on the larger scale of it, I think that the law in itself is arbitrary. It goes against what I would term as the modern labor conventions. But I guess it is also part of the government retaliating. As I said earlier, they're the biggest employers in the country. The government retaliating against all the strikes. Because I don't think a month goes by in this country whereby a profession isn't striking. Teachers, nurses, doctors, everyone, is striking. But, then comes the law of demand and supply. That is what, it drives employment, it drives labor and all of that. And in Uganda, the supply is way more than the demand. So if the professionals were to strike without getting that acceptance from the council, then they would be dismissed, and then they would bring in.
Is that okay? That is my issue.
Yes,
is it okay? My issue is,
Yes.
number one, is it okay for you see why government is on the spot in
John,
this
let me chip in.
is because okay.
Let me chip in quickly.
Okay, let me give
This
that
is
to-
itching me so much, and I
Okay.
find what my good sister is saying here, with due respect, it is not only academic, but again, that characterization in and of itself is too dangerous, and we should not even condone it. That there is no way on earth that we are going to spare the government of Uganda in its responsibility towards the labor industry. The government is responsible for one, putting the regulations and frameworks in place. Two, the government is responsible for enforcement. Three, the government is responsible for regulation. When you talk about the labor exploitation, who negotiates with the governments in Saudi Arabia, for instance? Isn't it the government? It is a government responsible for negotiating with the employers abroad. It is a government which is responsible for negotiating with the labor union. Now, when you say that the government has done its better part, I find that tragic and unbelievable, because
Alright.
because we were all
Speaking
citizens of this country.
domestically.
You see that the government is the one
Speaking
battering
domestically.
people in this country here. It is the same government putting stringent laws that before you protest, you must request government permission to do that.
Before
That
I
is laughable.
demonstrate against you,
No, you
have
have
to
mentioned
reflect.
all
first
those
give me
obligations,
permission
but
to
prepare for it.
demonstrate.
I
those
prepare
are
for you
basic
very well.
obligations for all rights. So, speaking domestically, where can you
Preta.
cite a derogation of a specific derogation? Not saying that they've just failed in their responsibilities broadly. So, domestically, what responsibility has the government derogated regarding labor rights domestically?
The government has largely derogated on the rights of employees.
I said specifically,
And I'm coming to that.
the specific right.
The right to withdraw labor.
That's
Even
one.
women
Two,
wage bills,
convention?
they have
Which
been dodging the
convention?
minimum
Which convention makes
Exactly.
Fair
You
payment.
see, Preta.
fair
Okay.
payment.
minimum wage bill has
Minimum
been
wage.
dodged.
But a
to
government
decide.
obligation.
1984 up to date.
Let me just ask: does government obligation only arise out of convention?
yes.
No.
It is the conventions
That
and
is,
treaties
do
that
all-
bind states.
Preta, you're
Okay.
misleading this,
Without
and this
these
is fallacies.
conventions,
With due respect, this is fallacies.
Preta, what you're
The
saying
government
is
does
that
not-
government. Okay, let me just ask this.
Yes.
So, Preta, what you're saying is that government of Uganda, its obligations to its citizens should only arise from
not
international
to citizens per
conventions.
se, but in regards to rights.
In
the
regards to
government
rights,
is
should only
bounded by
arise out of
international
conventions. Its obligations
Jenna, let
to
me-
its citizens,
let me say this
when it
straight.
comes to rights, should
Yes.
only arise out of international conventions.
That is how they are bound.
This is important.
Otherwise,
that is your
governments are going to
submission.
be.
This
like,
is very
yes.
important, gender.
It is the
labor
law,
rights.
yes.
Labor rights are human rights, and one, they are not given by the state, not by anyone. They are natural. The conventions are actually there to make sure that we see them.
When you
We
say
are
that
reminded,
human rights
and
are
then we can
natural, that
enforce
is
them.
only one school of thought, and there are like 5 schools of thought.
And challenge
on
me
that
on that.
subject.
The school of the natural school of law can never be challenged.
Okay,
We
let me
can have that judge
give
for another
Ivan
time.
a chance in this discussion. Yes, Ivan.
Yeah, that has been a discussion for lawyers. I'm not one. I'm lucky not to be. Coming back to our discussion, the whole sense is that even the few who come out to demonstrate are the lowest percentage which are employed by the government. They are the professionals, the minority are the ones who again even have the chance to demonstrate. But as a country, we should ask ourselves, where are the biggest percentage in the informal sector? Are they satisfied? Are they safe? Most of us here who hail from an environment which is more informal, we know that it is more worse, because them, they even can't, when they think of something like striking or what, it will look like they want to overthrow the government, because where they have reached, they have given up majority. They are now being used as political weapons to survive. So coming back to the extent, with a country where the minimum wage bill is being dodged by a president who invites here investors day and night, gives them tax holidays, gives them some even land and an environment. Because when the biggest challenge we are having, I think, even from the debate here, is that this government has reduced us very much, that we are the ones working for the government, yet it is government which should work for us. That is how much the current government has reduced Ugandans. That its role and responsibility is supposed to be carried by you, a citizen, and is a beneficiary of your results or your downfalls. It doesn't mind. That is where we are having a problem, that there is no way you are giving land to foreigners. In Bali, where I come from, there is an industrial park. People are paid 4,000 to 6,000 a day. They open for them like hens at 6, marching, work open for them at 5. Occupational Safety and Health Act, it has minimum standards. They are not implemented. Government is nowhere in their lives. The basic would be, even the Employment Act itself. It was last year I saw workers MP playing with it in Parliament, that they are amending. Someone who has worked in the informal sector for 4 months can then be turned to be given a contract. But where did it end? We begin on issues which are serious, but we take them unserious. The issue of a labor force in a country is actually what you use to judge a country, because it will show you how what is Rwanda could be used as the best way to benchmark. I don't know whether Uganda, we only go there to admire, celebrate a happy birthday of a president's son from there, or we go to really benchmark some things. Kagame has done some things just yesterday, but you can see there is order when it comes to some, not that because it's dictatorial in approach, but the planning. As long as you have labor unions that were brought up to weaponize, with leadership which is made to weaponize the people they should represent, the current state will have. Here we are giving chance to discuss the professionals, because the doctor, we shall see him on TV and radio. But there are other people who are being employed in the private sector, where government, you're the regulator. You even invite. I see we sit with them at Speak Resort, Munyonyo. We are going to give you, we want you to put money in our economy. How best do you ensure that Ugandans are safe in the hands of people who are going to? I think is why even the economic growth itself has not grown at a rate which is as much as the people coming in. It has come from such case scenarios. But as my brother well stated, there is no way we can hide away from calling government to account, because it is one of their roles and responsibilities. When we come down to our responsibilities as citizens, as long as you're paying tax, this government, this is why I told you it is us who are sustaining the government. But they have reduced us, even reduced, especially the elites, that we are surviving on government. A doctor knows Ugandans have paid tax, is why he wants to be paid. But now you have a God who sits somewhere in Entebbe. If you don't worship the God, you're going to suffer. The country should not be reduced to worshipping an individual to be at, because even look at parliament. Budget committees are accepting budget cuts because they don't see where the money is coming from. We resort to borrowing. But as we are borrowing, okay, you're now cutting to say you're not borrowing. That is the new approach you're taking. But what are the priorities? What revenue priorities in this country are suffering because government has failed to recognize majority of the informal sector as a way of organizing and getting more revenue, as a way of protecting and marketing better. All this you see Minister of Gender and Labour talk about labour export, what. She's even concentrating more on labour export because she has failed on domestic issues.
Absolutely.
You've never seen, even with all these strike stickers, I have not seen the minister come up that we are negotiating. You will see not to come the other day, Uganda Medical Association, the other day, this. You don't see the minister, you don't see all these workers representative. They are supposed to have an office at each district. They have no office in any district because they said they have no budget. They only have councillors, they have, you come to parliament, they have 5 MPs. The MPs who are also voted basing on politics, but not to, because it would be only actually trade unions voting. But when you see from the case scenario I gave you that the current state is seen from what you saw during the NSSF saga in parliament, that workers are, even those of you who are in the formal sector, you're being robbed that day and you have nothing. They have to go to a certain god to please the god so that you be at his sympathy. So as long as our countries run like that, we are in trouble.
Okay.
But the basic, we need to wake up as citizens, especially us who are in school. Let's request for the minimum wage bill. There is no reason you waste 4 years like me and her at university in a country with no minimum wage bill. It means you're vulnerable like anyone in the informal sector. You're to anyone's mercy and sympathy. You have no leverage in contracts. Because even you in the legal sector, you're now tied. The law speaks something else, but the whole environment created by the state. You will not, the backlog is stated very well in the industrial court. It's not that it is government's goodwill to have enough judges. There has no goodwill about that because really, should we say there are no people who qualify? But we say it has no money to pay them. The reason the industrial court has not been decentralized is because government has not seen goodwill. Because I know from a leadership perspective, when people are also well, they are hard to roll and lead. I know that. I know that kind of dimension, but we need to call up and wake up, at least for the basics, like wage bills, the basics, like, because you can't say you have an occupational safety and health act in a country where you have no national health insurance. It doesn't add up. So if you government, you have no national health insurance, how do you expect a company or a factory to give health insurance to its workers? Only these NGOs that have come around are doing this. But even find a public institution has no health insurance. So all these call that governments need to plan better.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ivan. Let me get back to Preta. So let's talk about the several complaints that have come out from workers on the issues of discrimination. Recently, it was cited among the people, the health workers. They brought out several issues of discrimination. We have had several, especially public workers, come out and talk about salary disparities. There are issues of some people being exempt from taxes, others are not. Recently, prosecutors might anytime from now be exempt from tax. When their counterparts, the lawyers, are not exempt from tax, they actually even pay withholding tax of 6%. What is your perspective on all these complaints of discrimination?
So Article 21 and 40 of the Constitution guarantee us equality, be it in work, in education, regardless of sex, race, tribe, regardless of anything. And the government has put in place the Equal Opportunities Commission to look through all those cases. If you have a complaint against maybe your employer, say maybe they didn't give me a job on basis of my tribe, then you can file a complaint and it will be looked into. I think the starkest point of inequality would be, say, teachers, the science teachers and the arts teachers. whereby the science teachers are being paid more money than the arts teachers, and it is now government policy that because the science is of more importance to the country and where it's going, the science teachers should be paid more money. It is inequality, like, from the outside perspective, but from the legal perspective, it can not be seen as inequality, because yes, they are all teachers, but then they're arts teachers and they're science teachers, and it's the government policy. I think in our objectives in the constitution, they have that part where they be like, policies shall be based on what the government wants, their needs and wants. So it's a bit of a hard situation whereby the art teachers cannot, they could come together and sue, they could sue the government, and they cite a case of discrimination, but it is unlikely that their case could go through. But I feel that the biggest points of discrimination are due to corruption and nepotism, whereby to get employed, to break into a certain industry, you have to know someone, you have to be related to someone. Actually, I think it was last year or the other year where the president said that he would like jobs to be taken up by the children of the ministers and the MPs, those
When
Bazukulu,
MPs die, the
because
sons replace.
they will be in a position whereby they will not be corrupt, because they come from they come from money, and aren't trying to steal more money or something of that, and that's already discrimination. But the system generally is already skewed, like the power imbalance is overboard. Those who have power have too much of it, and those who don't have power literally do not have any allies to try to correct that injustice. Also, there are the cases of sexual harassment. We don't have any national law dealing with sexual harassment, so it depends on an organization to be like, this is our internal policy on the issue. I used to volunteer for an organization. It was called Africa End Sexual Harassment Initiative, IESHI, and one of the members used to work at the Court of Appeal, and she was sexually harassed by her superior. So she filed the case internally, but this man has power, like literally has everybody, the HR department and everybody under his thumb. So it didn't work out. So she took the case to the High Court. Then unfortunately, this man got to be appointed, I think it was last year, he was appointed to the Court of Appeal as a justice, and that just got infinitely more difficult. So she was recommended to file her case with the industrial court, and I think she filed it last year. But every time they'd be like, okay, we have set the hearing for Monday. Then they go to Monday and they're like, oh, the judge isn't around. Then they'd be like, okay, I postponed the case to 3 months later. 3 months later, they'd be like, oh, the file got lost. So there have been over 10 appearances in the court, and literally nothing has happened. And with these kinds of civil claims, it can easily expire.
The judge may even die before the
yes, there are these limitations on those kinds of claims. So the more they postpone, the case gets retained, people move on, the witnesses die, leave the country, and all of that, and justice is not served, because justice is supposed to be served in a short period of time for it to be justice.
Yes.
So there's that. So I think in cases of discrimination and inequality, it is due to the huge imbalance of power. Regarding that issue of tax, for example, soldiers, members of the UPDF, do not pay taxes.
They don't.
They do not.
UPDF,
Yeah.
Uganda prisons, police,
Policemen
judiciary.
pay taxes as if.
Yeah, prisons do.
Yeah.
Police, judiciary, UPDF.
Yes, and so I for me, I think that the tax exemption is supposed to be like an incentive for you to be faithful, because this government has been in power for long. So if you don't give your soldiers an incentive, they might go wild, like this soldier who killed his boss and himself. So they're an incentive and all of that. So if it is top policy, the policy is coming from the government, it is saying that we are putting sciences as priority, and you, an arts teacher, are trying to find that equity, that equality, it is very likely that you will not find it because it's the nation's policy. So I think it is correct to say that a lot of our policies on labor are rooted in inequality and discrimination.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask Abdul, probably this will be my second last question to you. My issue is on the strength of the bodies that have been put in place to advocate for labor rights. What is their strength?
Oh, thank you so much. One, I would say that the labor unions, the associations, actually don't have power. They are so weak to the extent that the party with whom they're supposed to negotiate has more power over them. I did earlier on say that these associations have been weaponized and they have been politicized to the extent that they are under the mercies of government. A whole union, trade union, cannot negotiate with the government on better terms with the government on behalf of its members. I find that tragic. Like, they do not basically have the equal strength or the necessary support and strength to negotiate with the government. And even if it's not the government, let's say with other employers, they do not have the strength to negotiate. Why is this so? The conditions have made this that have made this as it is.
The environment.
The environment. It is not by accident. It is by design. Like, the government has designed the institutional frameworks or the labor unions to be so vulnerable that it can trample over them at any point in time. Instead of having the unions exercise their functions effectively, it is usually the few who are chosen to represent the aspirations. And the wrong thing about this kind of democratization is that the few elected leaders to represent the workers actually do not represent the direct and accurate views of the laborers themselves. That by the time they get to the government, they tend to appreciate the offer. The government would give whatever kind of justification or rationalization of their policies to the labor unions, and they take it in. I want to see a day when ministers would complain about labor, maybe pay rise, or they will strike. You never see that. These are the people who are responsible for stewardship.
As you summarize, we have actually run out of time.
Yes, conclusively, I'm saying that the stewards of the employment industry are the helm of making it hard actually for the employees. I want the government to come up with performance indicators. The government is apparently focusing on income statements being filed maybe with the URA and all that, but the government does not focus on job performance and due diligence. You get the point. You realize that an investor maximizes profit at the end, at the expense of the employee. The employee works his hands to the bone, and yet he's underpaid. When the when the employer pays the taxes to the government feels content. Yet the government should actually look at the production of this employee, how much the employee has invested in making sure that this company actually gets this profit share. Now, another issue with incentives is this. By the time the government grants a tax incentive or a tax waiver to a company, the company should be in position to actually increase the wage of the employees. If at all you are given tax waivers, the purpose is to cut down production costs. And what does that mean? The employees' salaries or wages should be increased as well. But then, if at all wages or waivers are given to
on the same amount.
Yes, on the same amount, like you continue to tax, I think that will be so unfair. And then to conclude with, I want to allow my sister on this. I actually agree with her that the discrimination is so wide, the income inequality is too high, and the government has to fix that.
Okay, we have come to the end of the talk show. Let me give a minute each, less than a minute actually, to give us your solution. Ivan.
Yeah, solutions going forward. Things regarding labor even though need sensitization. We even have a good policy framework. My request is the goodwill by government, not to have workers structures in place for fashion and decoration, but let them be of purpose. They need to account from as low as the village where you have a workers to a sub-county, district councillor for workers, participates in voting a national MP for workers, and also the workers' representatives in trade unions. Don't go and sit in bars in Kololo, negotiate with NSSF, rob workers. Representatives of workers' union have at least some respect for the people you represent. Not going out kneeling to presidents and everyone just for mercy. Let there be a country where people are proud of their professions. And this starts with people getting interest in fighting, getting interest in promoting a better work environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Unlike most human rights that require a top-down approach, I think labor rights are more of a bottom-up approach. The government can put legal frameworks, they can make allocations for, labor MPs and ministries and all of that. But that's not what is really important to labor rights. Labor rights begin from down, from the worker, him or herself. In all the successful workers' rights movement, we can see that the campaigning, the advocacy began from down, from the workers in the factory coming together saying, maybe today we shall not work, maybe we shall make such standard goods or something of that sort. That is where it is important. If workers come together with the spirit and the urge to, to better their conditions, I believe that it is possible, for labor rights to be of importance in this country. We can have strong workers' unions as long as the people down there, the workers in the informal sector, in the formal sector, are deliberate about their attempt. And I also think that unemployment is very, very, very important in this conversation about labor rights. As long as the supply outweighs the demand,
Very dangerous.
then all workers will be replaceable. And when you are replaceable, you really have no rights. You're really not a human. You're just, a part of a machine that can easily be replaced day in, day out. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Abdu.
Conclusively, one, the government must operationalize all the laws and institutional frameworks that we have in place. They are not for ornament, they are there to help the workers. And then secondly, the government has to fix the discrepancies in employment wages. You realize that there's a wide disparity in terms of payment actually. There are other people who are paid more than others when they're doing the same job. The government has to harmonize that. Thirdly, the government must also exercise its mandate. I strongly emphasize that the government is the steward of the employment industry. They have the monopoly of force and actually resources at their disposal. So they should effectively utilize that.
Okay, thank you so much. We have come to the end of our talk show. Thank you to Ivan, Peter, and Abdu for always coming through and gracing our invitation to be part of this panel. Thank you so much, Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV, for giving this platform to university students who are able to come on this platform and discuss these very important issues. Thank you to our viewers for watching. Feel free to give us your comment. Feel free to give your opinion and perspective on this very pertinent topic that affects all of us. From us, we say thank you. From me, I say thank you. See you again next week, same time.